Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends, and today is part 4 of our 6-part Modern Masters 2015 set review. We'll be looking specifically at all the red cards in the set today. So over the last few days, we looked at white, blue, black. Tomorrow, we'll review all the green cards. The following day, we'll get all the rest of the cards that are in the set. So if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, definitely a good time to do so. You'll be informed when we post the next couple chapters of our set review, and we also have a lot of great content that will be coming out next week as well. So having said that, let's go ahead and jump into the review, and our first card is Banefire. Banefire is a fantastic modern card. It sees some play in some modern burn decks, and in limited, this thing's going to be a bomb for you. So in the early game, it's going to let you destroy a creature. Late game, it can be a win condition. If you're playing against blue and you're worried about counter spells, hey, if you got enough mana, you don't have to worry about counter spells or damage being prevented or anything like that when you play Banefire. So just a really phenomenal finishing card. Next is Blades of Velzvel. Now pay attention that it is a tribal instant and it's a changeling, so that does matter in certain circumstances. And also, not only is it a decent combat trick, gives 2 of your creatures +2/+0, but it also has them gain all creature types, which again isn't always going to matter, but sometimes will matter in the limited game. So you're going to see a few cards in red that kind of plays off this elemental matters theme and things like that. So definitely a decent card. Not always going to make your cut. It's going to depend on your deck a little bit, but it is a nice combat trick. Pretty cheap. This is Blood Ogre, and I remember when this guy first came out many years ago in his limited environment in the core set, he was a powerhouse. Now, granted, this is a very powerful set. He's probably not going to stand out quite as much as he did then, but paying 3 for a 2/2 first striker is a fantastic aggressive card. If you get the Bloodthirst, and there's plenty of ways to enable the Bloodthirst, as you're going to see as we continue forward here, 3/3 for 3 and first strike, yeah, that's kind of awesome. So he's at the common level. He's going to show up a lot. He's going to be awesome for your aggro limited builds. Bloodshot Trainee. This is a weird one. Paying 4 for a 2/3 is not in itself very good, especially in this set, in this environment. Now, if you have ways to get its power up to 4, its ability is awesome. So if you have maybe some graft cards in your deck and you want to throw this guy in because you think you can get him up to 4 pretty consistently, or maybe you just have a lot of combat tricks, maybe you do have one of the few auras in the set, then yeah, he's probably worth running, but make sure you have enough outlets to get him up to 4 before you commit to him in your deck. You don't want him to be a dead draw or a basic 2/3 for 4. It's just not going to be good for you. Brute Force. This card was originally printed in Planar Chaos, which was kind of a set where they had a little bit of fun with the color pie and did an alternate reality and a what if sort of reality. And this was Giant Growth, and this is the red version of it. So awesome card. It's at the common level, so you'll see plenty of it. It's a quick, cheap combat trick that's very, very powerful, and I'm sure most of you played with Giant Growth. You know how swingy this card can make a game. Really fantastic card. Burst Lightning, and here's some direct damage for you. Not a whole lot to say about it. It's just fantastic direct damage. It's 2 damage for 1, so it's basically a shock. If you have the extra mana, you can kick it to do 4 damage instead of 2. That's kind of awesome. Combust, and here's the red color hosing card. Again, very aggressively costed. Probably going to start out in your sideboard, but if you're playing against white or blue creatures, you're going to bring this in. You're going to be very, very happy to do so. Comet Storm, and this is basically Fireball at instant speed for 1 more red. And Fireball's good. This is even better. So the fact that it uses the multi-kicker is just kind of a way that helps clarify it from a rules point of view, because in the old days when Fireball was printed, it was kind of confusing and just really didn't gel well with the rules, just the game rules. And they did some crazy things over the years to try to explain how Fireball works and how it splits its damage. And I remember at one point they actually had a 1 red, an X and a Y, where the X was the damage and the Y was how many times it got split, and it was just confusing players left and right. So this is a cleaner version of the card, and at instant speed, don't underestimate that. That is very, very powerful. This card does see some modern play. This is at the mythic rare slot because it is so powerful. This can easily get you 2 for 1s, 3 for 1s, 4 for 1s, or it can be a game ender at times. Dragon Soul Knight, and this is one of the cards that kind of fits into the 5-color theme, and you'll see as we go forward there's ways to enable that. But even on his own, paying 3 for a 2/2 first striker is just fine. There's probably better cards in the set if you don't have a way to activate his ability, but he's a decent guy, and if you can activate his ability, he's pretty good. Fiery Fall, and here's some more direct damage. What I like about these cards, though, the basic land cycling cards, you don't see as many of these in Modern Masters 2015 as we saw in the last Modern Masters, but here you have a card that can do 5 damage to a creature. That's awesome. But if you pull it early in the game, or maybe you draw it, now instead you can land cycle. And it's basic land cycling, so you are able to pull any basic land, and that is going to help you if you're trying to play that 5-color strategy, and is at the common level, so you can expect to see a few of them as you draft. Goblin Fireslinger. This guy is basically your Bloodthirst enabler. He's an awesome Bloodthirst enabler. He's that common. You'll see plenty of them. Only costs 1 to play, and he can start pinging players so that Bloodthirst can get active, and you can start playing your Bloodthirst creatures and getting their bonuses. He is going to be awesome in this format. Goblin Warpaint. Here's one of the few auras in the set, and I believe there's this one, there's Splinter Twin, which we'll look at in a few minutes, and there's Daybreak Coronet in white. I might be missing one, but here's the thing with this. This is an okay aura. I'm not a huge fan of auras because it's really easy to get 2 for 1, but what I like about this one is it costs 2, so it's very aggressively costed, and it gives you the pump, but also gives you haste, so maybe you're able to get in with a little damage before you get 2 for 1, so it might make it worthwhile. This is also one of the very few cards that's going to enable Daybreak Coronet, so if you do pull a Daybreak Coronet and you want to use it, you're probably going to want to draft as many of these as you can to make that card even better. It's a risky strategy, especially considering I don't think there's many or any hexproof creatures that I can think of. I could be forgetting one, but that strategy would be much better in a hexproof type strategy. But this is here. It's here to enable cards. It's also going to enable things like Bloodshot Trainee. So there's definitely a purpose for this. I don't hate this as much as I hate a lot of aura cards. Gorehorn Minotaurs, and he's a 3/3 for 4, which is fine. He's basically a hill giant, but if you can Bloodthirst him, he's a 5/5 for 4. Super aggressive card, again at the common level. You'll see a lot of these going around, and there's definitely a nice little black-red Bloodthirst aggressive deck here that could be a lot of fun. Gutshot, and here is the Pyrexia mana card for red. It's not a super powerful one on paper, but don't underestimate what 1 damage at instant speed can do, especially after combat. You're able to finish off some big creatures sometimes and kind of fool your opponent into making some blocks that aren't profitable, and you don't even need any mana to cast it. So don't forget, you can put this in any of your decks. You don't have to worry about just putting in a red deck. If you need some direct damage in your white deck, then Gutshot's for you. Again, it's at the common level, so you could get a couple of those even in a draft and be pretty happy probably. This is Hellkite Charger, and this guy costs 6. He's a 5/5 flyer, but he has haste, which makes it really more feel like a 5 than a 6 casting cost. So this is a very good guy, very good flyer, and if you happen to have the 6 mana and you can get an additional combat phase, he can win you a game. So very, very good card, very strong card for limited. Incandescent Soulstroke, and here it's finally paying off. I think I've been saying for 4 videos now that there's certain tribal types that matter, and Element's one of them. Elemental creatures get +1/+1. There he is, and he's uncommon, so if you're lucky you might be able to pull a couple of him in a draft, and on top of that you can also kind of flash your elemental creatures into play, have them attack once, but then they do get sacrificed at the end of turn. So he's a nice elemental lord. There's definitely some synergies with him in a number of different colors, so look for some elemental synergies when you're building your decks in limited. Innerflame Igniter, and this guy is part of a theme that went on in the Lorwyn block where you had abilities, and if you did it 3 times you got some sort of bonus from it. This guy's okay. He's a decent late game mana sink, and it's always nice to be able to kind of pump your power and then eventually get first strike. That can be very powerful. However, it is very mana intensive. He's only a 2/2. He's going to be pretty fragile, and he's not going to be for every deck. There's times where one of this guy is going to be fine in some of your decks, but Red's trying to be a little more aggressive. I don't think it's trying to be so late game focused in this environment. So I don't know if this is going to be a good one in most cases. Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, and he's a mythic rare. If you've ever played Constructed Modern, you're familiar with him from the Splinter Twin deck. He's pretty much a staple in that deck. And he's in the set. Splinter Twin, what we're going to look at in a few minutes, is also in the set, but they didn't put the enablers to kind of enable that combo in here, which is good because, I mean, that's okay in Cube, but you don't necessarily want to see that in your limited environment when you're playing a set like Modern Masters, when there could be multiple copies of certain cards of the combo floating around and stuff. So anyway, having said that, he's a fantastic card, and don't underestimate how good his ability still is. Even if you can't do the crazy broken combo with it, just getting the extra token into play and being able to haste in an attack is sometimes very, very, very relevant. His only drawback in limited is he does cost 3 red, so that might be difficult in some decks to do, but red has some potential ways to accelerate mana a little bit, so if anything, red's probably the best color for this type of thing. Lightning Bolt, so arguably the best direct damage spell ever made, and just as a side note, we saw Brute Force earlier, which was a rift off of Giant Growth, so just a little fun fact for you. In Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited, the original Magic sets, Richard Garfield created a cycle of cards that all cost 1 mana, and they all had a link that they had something to do with the number 3. So Lightning Bolt was the red version. For 1 red, you did 3 damage. Giant Growth was the green. 1 green, and your creature, or target creature, got +3/+3. White had Healing Salve, which said 1 white, and you could either gain 3 life or prevent 3 damage to yourself or one of your creatures. The black card was Dark Ritual. 1 black gave you 3 black mana to your mana pool. And finally, the blue card was Ancestral Recall. 1 blue, let you draw 3 cards. Some of those cards better than others, but for the most part, they're all pretty good cards, except maybe Healing Salve. So here we are, all these years later, playing with a plane shifted version of Giant Growth and Lightning Bolt itself. And I don't think Ancestral Recall will be seeing print anytime soon, but just goes to show you how powerful some of those early cards were. Not to get too far off subject, Lightning Bolt's awesome. It's played all the time in Modern, and not just in burn decks. It's just an awesome red card, just hugely economical. You're going to draft as many of these as you can possibly draft in Limited. It's just awesome. I can't say enough good things about it. Scarrigan Firebird. This guy's okay. He costs 6, which is a little pricey for a 3/3, but if you can enable the Bloodthirst, now he's a 6/6 flyer. That's pretty good. And as long as you have a lot of extra red mana lying around, it should be pretty easy to bring him back from the graveyard to your hand. So he can be kind of one of those annoying cards that players have trouble with. I mentioned yesterday in the Black review possibly having a reason to sideboard in Surgical Extraction into your deck. This guy might be a reason to sideboard Surgical Extraction into your deck. And being a Phyrexian mana card, you can sideboard that into any deck. Doesn't have to be a black deck. So this guy can be a little bit disruptive, but he is a little costly as well. So know your deck. Make sure you can afford to play him. Smash to Smithereens, and there's a lot of artifacts in the set, and we're going to see those in a couple days when we look at all the artifacts, if I don't lose my voice trying to read through them all. But this is a great card, and I would probably just main deck this, quite honestly. You're going to run into some artifact. I'd be shocked if there's decks out there that aren't running at least 1 or 2 artifacts, because there's some pretty quality ones out there. You can probably main deck this one, and hey, it's a great way to also enable your Bloodthirst as well. Smoke Braider, and here's where we start finding ways for us to cast these elemental spells and activate elemental abilities of multicolors, and this is a great way to do it. He's at the common level. He's going to help you ramp a little bit. He's going to let you get different colors out for your elementals. Pretty good card. He's an enabler card. He's not going to fit into every deck. You might not need him in your deck, and that's fine, but if you have a deck that's trying to do something like this, he's going to be great for you. Soulbright Flamekin, and here's another one of these elemental effects that when you do it 3 times you get a bonus, and it's pretty nice ramp for you. And giving creatures trample is not to be overlooked. That can really help you, and even help you win games sometimes in stalled board states. So this guy's cheap. He's at the common level. You can pay 2 to give something trample. That on itself might be very helpful to you. And later on, when you have 6 mana, you can turn 6 mana into 8 red mana. Hey, that can be helpful, especially if you're trying to do something crazy like cast an Eldrazi or something. So, very decent card. Again, it's probably not going to be for all decks. You got to know your deck, know if the trample mechanic's going to help you or not, and also know if you really need to ramp from 6 to 8 mana. Not all decks are going to need to do that. Spike Shot Elder, this guy's pretty good. He's a 1-drop. I think that's the key here. He's a 1-drop, and then you can pay 3 to sack him to maybe just do 1 point of damage, but that's good enough. And if you do have ways to pump this guy or graft or put aura on him or something, you can potentially do more damage. He's at the rare level. That should let you know how powerful he can be. He can do some broken things if he's not in check. And this card definitely sees modern play and constructed as well. Spike Bellows. This guy's pretty good. This is kind of an annoying creature to play. He costs 6, which is a little higher in your curve, but he's a 6/1, and when he leaves the battlefield, he deals 6 damage to target creature. So you can just attack in with him. Your opponent's got a choice to make now. They either have to block, probably lose 1 creature, and then lose a second one when this thing dies, or else take the 6 damage. And if you can't get up to your 6 mana, you can still play the Evoke, and you can just go ahead and basically hit a creature for 6. So this is a very strong card. It's nice removal if you're just looking at the evoke cost, and it's even better if you are up to 6 mana. Splinter Twin. So a lot of people happy this was being reprinted. This was just a very expensive card, getting more expensive all the time. Splinter Twin, right now, I'd say is probably the premier deck in Modern. As long as sideboards side aggressively against it and people are paying attention to Splinter Twin, I don't think it needs to be banned. But it's on the cusp of running out of control to the point where maybe a year from now this thing's banned. I don't know. I guess we'll see what the future holds with this card. But like I said, you can't necessarily in limited do the broken combo with this like you can in constructed. However, don't underestimate this combo. I mean, just look at the last card, for example. What if I just Splinter Twin this guy and I could attack in with him and make another copy of him, attack in with that copy. Now I'm attacking for 12 damage, and then my opponent maybe takes 6 of it, blocks the other one. I do 6 to a creature. It just gets crazy. And if the opponent doesn't block, the creature still goes away, and I still get to do 6 damage to another creature. So, that's just one example of what you can do with Splinter Twin, and it's just an awesome card, and it's going to be great in limited, and we know what it can do in constructed. Stormblood Berserker. This is another one of those Bloodthirst cards that's very, very powerful, and I played this a lot in Limited back in the day. And you get this guy out as a 2 casting cost 3/3 on like turn 2, and it can only be blocked by 2 or more creatures. You're getting in for some damage, and you complement this with like the Pinger Goblin and with like the 3/3 first strike Bloodthirst guy, and you got quite a deck on your hands there. So watch for those opportunities. This guy can be very, very strong. He is at the uncommon level, not common, so you won't see as many of him, but he'll be still relatively frequently around. Thunderblast. I don't love these cards normally. The cards that are kind of like the really high red casting cost with the haste that are basically meant to go in and attack once and die. I don't know, like they don't really appeal to me. There's some good ones like Ball Lightning out there. This one I like a little better though because of the persist. You basically get to do it twice. So he comes in as a 7/2 haste. Now he doesn't have trample the first time, so he's probably going to get chump blocked in most cases. And then what's going to happen is he's going to come back as a 6/1, and then he can get in with trample. So he's a guy. He's not my favorite card. And the main reason is because I just don't feel that he helps propel your board state very much. It's almost like a direct damage spell more than anything, which isn't a horrible thing, but it's a direct damage spell that gives your opponent the option of chump blocking or not chump blocking. So once your opponent starts making choices, the card becomes less good. So I don't know. I'm not saying I would never play this guy, but he's definitely not one of my favorites when there's just so much other power in the set. Also, he does cost 3 red, which is a consideration when it comes to casting him. Although he is an elemental, on the flip side of the coin, you may have an elemental theme going with some other synergies, and then he might become much better. Treble Flames. And here's a domain card, so again, it's kind of falling into the 5 colors, but domain specifically is looking for 5 different basic lands. So you can't necessarily use cards that are just giving you mana from non-basic lands like the bounce lands or something like that and get any bonus off Treble Flame. So just something to keep in mind. If you have a lot of fiery fells, this might become a better card. But even paying 2, and let's say you're running a 2-color deck, paying 2 for 2 damage is not bad. Now, granted, there's a lot of more powerful things, especially considering this is a sorcery and not an instant, so it's not always going to make the cut in your deck, but it's not horrible. Don't overlook this card. Viciano Slaughtermaster. This guy I don't like quite as much, and just mostly because he's a red card and he's asking 2 other colors of you, and I just don't think there's much of a need to play 3 colors in this format, just because each color on its own is so powerful. 2 colors I could buy, 3 colors when you're starting to splash for a third just starts to feel a little unnecessary to me. Now, having said that, he's a common. He's a 1/1 double striker for 2. That in itself is not bad. So even if you just ignore his ability, and then there are other ways to pump him. We saw things like Goblin Warpaint. There's graft cards out there, and if you start pumping him early, he can be a force to be reckoned with. So know your deck. There's going to be decks where this guy is going to be just fine, and he's probably going to be more than just fine. But don't bank on the fact that you're going to be casting black and green mana to pump him in most cases. Next is Wildfire, and I actually played this in Standard back in the day, and I want to say, I think it was Odyssey time period. This was a really fine card in Constructed Standard at that time. It sees a little bit of Modern play. It's still a very good card. You want to be careful with this in Limited. There are decks that will be fine with this, but if you're playing a lot of small creatures, you don't want to necessarily burn your creatures out. If you're playing a very mana-intensive or maybe color-intensive deck, you don't want to have to sacrifice the 4 lands. So if you have the right deck, this can be great. This can be a great sorcery for you. Most decks, though, be very careful when you try to play this in Limited. World Heart Phoenix. So 4 for a 2/2 flyer is not horrible. It's maybe not quite as good in Modern Masters World than it is in, say, if you're playing Dragons of Tarkir or something, but it's still decent. It's always nice to have a 2/2 with evasion. Now, if you happen to get to the point where you can pay the 5 colors, and this guy can be brought back from your graveyard as a 4/4 flyer, well, yeah, he's absolutely going to be a fine guy for you. So keep that in mind. He's not going to always make the cut in your deck. If you don't feel comfortable getting the 5 colors, he's going to make some red decks. He's not going to make other red decks. It's just going to depend on what other cards you have, because there's just so many powerful cards in this set. And our last card of the day is Rapid Flames. And when you look at this card, it's a sorcery. It costs 4. And you look, it deals 1 damage to up to 3 target creatures. Okay, that's okay. But read the next line. Those creatures can't block this turn. This is your way to get damage across in a board stall. This is your way to get lethal in at the end of a game. You're playing with your maybe small-ish aggressive creatures, and they did a ton of damage, and now they just hit a wall, and they're starting to run into bigger creatures they can't get through. This is the card that's going to allow you to finish off the game. It is at the common level, so there'll be plenty of these to go around. Don't underestimate this card. It can be very, very powerful in the right deck in the right situation. Well, that is the end of all the red cards for Modern Masters 2015. Like I said, tomorrow we'll be back with the green cards, and the following day we'll be back with all the multicolor and colorless cards. Quickly, I do want to say thank you to all the new subscribers we've gotten over the last couple weeks. I know a lot of folks have been interested in Modern Masters and stumbled upon us, so thank you for subscribing. We really appreciate it. Hey, and as always, have a great day.